Rolling.
Good afternoon, good morning, I'm not entirely sure the time is, it's afternoon I believe. Good afternoon, this is a presentation I've created on my work experience from this year. Obviously we had to complete 30 days for our course. I split this into the following three stations. Nerve Radio, obviously a student radio based station at Bournemouth University. Aspire Radio, we all know and love, as we've done it from week one, and Hot Radio, local station to Bournemouth and Hall College, a community station. So, an overall review of my work experience. I can say it's been incredibly beneficial to my overall development. Enthusiasm and industry knowledge. I can say that from the wide variety of work experience I have gained, has stimulated a multi-array of different assets which I believe will help me become professional, successful and diverse in our media radio industry. I have seen an overall improvement in my presenting, producing, content writing and a greater understanding of aesthetics. When I say aesthetics, I mean understanding what sounds good and what sounds really nice on radio. Some things don't translate to radio very well. This is something I think I've picked up quite a lot this year. A greater understanding of the business side within the station. It's important to understand we are just presenters, or maybe we're going to production side, but it's also interesting to know how the business side is affected within a radio station. And I gained a lot of experience with dealing with rejection. I mean, I feel it's important in this process to understand when we gain experience dealing with rejection, it's not the end of the world. At the end of the day, it is a requisite to success in my opinion, because failure at the end of the day pushes us harder and further. So, starting with Aspire. Aspire obviously was the first radio station and a continuous piece of invaluable work experience that I have acquired. Aspire shows have given me a basic understanding of how shows can be formatted. Being given this opportunity to create our own radio content has been a great insight into the workings of a normal studio. Being given full reign on the station has ultimately given not just me, but the whole group a palette in which we've been able to be creative, imaginative in a scenario that mistakes can slightly be made to a certain point. My first real experience of presenting on radio has come from Aspire, which gives me a step up to where I am today, I believe. I've either taken a producer, news role, or sometimes a presenter role. But the reason I decided to take a producer or news presenter role was maybe to try something different that I may not be able to do further down the line, for instance, at Nerve. So yeah, I wanted to try my hand with that and see if I could present news properly. And we also had to think about targeting specific demographic when producing content and music choice. Obviously this is based on the demographic of university students. So obviously we are university students anyway, so we should know where to go from there. Limitations. There are only a few limitations, but I think it is worth noting when we talk about work experience where we could have done better, what things could have helped us out better. I think a scheduled Aspire timetable would have been something that would have been beneficial from us at the start of the year, to try and create an Aspire timetable which had a proper content order, show, reel, everything. Fundamental planning. I mean, there are some times where me as an individual or as a group, we may have underlooked the planning side to a show. We maybe freestyled it a bit too much, and I think a bit of fundamental planning doesn't go amiss. It's just a photo of me in Aspire, just to make sure everyone knows that I did Aspire. Hot Radio. So, I experienced a great amount of Hot Radio over the extended period of work I did on the morning show with host Paul Stevens. Hot Radio is a local community radio station serving Bournemouth and Poole, playing an eclectic mix of music comprising of the last 5 decades. Very well-known songs, and to be honest, all of them were a lot of good sing-alongs, which I enjoyed. I really did learn some interesting things from my time at Hot Radio. I started on Paul's show. Now he works from 7 till 10, that is his breakfast show, but work starts a lot earlier for him, and it's applaudable to say the least. I find it hard. I had to get up at around 4:30 made my way into the Hot Studios in Poole for 5 o'clock. I'd get up, well, barely get up. I'd eat a banana, stick some clothes on, and I'd drive to work, and it wasn't fun. But I can see from this that there's another side to the glamorous presenting life that we may think there is. But there's a lot of work that goes into Hot Radio, and especially Poole's show. So I definitely learned the realities. I help produce content for individual bits between songs personally. I also worked on a birthday song, which is a segment that Poole does on his show, where if anyone has a birthday, there's a birthday song, and we talk about people whose birthdays it isn't today. And it's always pivotal to make sure that you link someone with a birthday, maybe professional or someone in the public eye, try and link them back to the listeners, so someone from Bournemouth and Poole area, someone that's local, because what I found with Hot Radio is that making sure that you have specific content directed to the demographic that they try and portray to is really imperative, because it keeps people interested and it keeps ears up, and at the end of the day it did work. Yes, and it brings me on to further volunteering work. As I said earlier, I applied for volunteer work at HOT over the summer. I have an interview in the next few days to find out, and it really has actually sparked an interest in community station, which I possibly didn't have so much beforehand, but I definitely would enjoy working in a community station for a bulk period of my career at some point. Limitations, there weren't many limitations, to be honest with you, but what we can say is I gained knowledge from watching and questioning and quizzing as a student, rather than getting the hands-on experience that I would have done at Aspire and NERV. It's important to, at the end of the day, get a good grasp of every single aspect from your work experience. So questioning and watching is easily as good. And 5 AM is not an easy time to work. This brings me on to NERV, an ongoing piece of work experience that I've loved. There's been a weekly NERV show with Alex Hammond. We had it Mondays, 8 till 9 PM. I've really seen a personal development with the show. Creating content, everything in the programme was created by ourselves. The interstitial elements, the jingles, all the song choices were all picked by us. And I think it shows an element of professionalism. We got some listener feedback from a few people, and they seemed to really, really enjoy the show. It was something different. It was something that they hadn't normally heard on radio, and they liked our laid-back approach to presenting, which is something that I think we did very well. I mean, we have a very unique style of podcasting presenting, I'd say, it's a lot more laid back. And as Alex said earlier, we gained an FM temporary licence at NERV, and we were granted a 10 till 12 PM weekend slot, which was good. We had to create content such as Brain or Bluff, Desert Island Desks, a segment called Sprace is Crazy, Weird News, album reviews, mini mixes, you name it, we pretty much did it. I've also applied for the Head of NERV evenings to start next September. I've handed my CV and demo in, also along with hopefully doing some magazine work with NERV, which would be really good. I'd be interested in doing some magazine writing. The limitations, learning by doing rather than outside training. I mean, when I say that, we were stuck in there at the deep end. We were shown around for 15 minutes, and then it was all up to us, and we were left to do it at night. And especially on that weekend show, we were working 10 till 12. We were the last ones in the building and the last ones out, and we actually had to go out through the exit, the fire exit. So we sort of got left to our own devices in that sense. But at the same time, it was a great learning experience. I would have loved a daily show to boost listener base, but I understand that our specialist show probably wouldn't work on a daily basis, maybe unless you played us last thing in the evening. But it's also important to understand that NERV is a student-based radio station, and everyone is allowed a fair chance. Yes, quick demo. You've already heard part of it from Alex, but I'm just playing my laptop. Oh, that is maybe too quiet. Is that too quiet? Watch. I can't really.
No.
Huh?
Does it not go into that?
No, I don't think there's a pause.
It's 9 o'clock. I'm Alex.
And I'm George.
Yes.
Never really changed.
No, I mean, I try not to, avoid confusion. Yeah.
How are you anyway, Alex?
I'm alright,
Sun hill.
Yeah, on turn of a cold, really.
Something
Terrible. It's been a nasty one. It's been playing online, playing tricks on me.
Really?
I don't like it. But, no, yeah, a lot better.
Well, what have we got coming up on the show then?
Oh, we got the YouTube release coming up just next, which is it's got like some demo tracks from the new Project Jack U. Very excited. Our album yesterday, I think. We got the Weird Tune of the Week, obviously. We got some more weird news for you, and we've got a new topic this week.
Yes, we have a new segment on our show. Just a small little one.
Yeah. We'll tell you about that later.
I was looking at you, shall we?
Yeah, I don't think we'll reveal it just yet.
So you're listening to Nerve Radio.
Yeah, George and Alex.
And it's coming up to 8:30 here on the show.
We'll do it out there.
And now, we've got a nice little thing called Dessert Island Discs.
Yeah.
It's our
New segment.
it's our new take on Desert Island Discs.
I like it.
Alex,
Go on, George.
I have a little question for you. What would happen if we were able to fly? I don't mean like supersonic speeds.
Okay.
I mean
How
like
fast?
bird of prey fast. That sort of. I mean, some birds of prey can be out pretty quick. So, but but like, if this was going to happen, do you think it would be on the same level? Sort of like, with running, right? You have got people like Usain Bolt, who's the quickest in the world. Then surely there would be people who would be like the quickest flyers in the world. Is that the term? The fastest flyers?
The fastest flights. George, did you know that apparently peregrine falcons can exceed 20 miles an hour? Wow. Pretty fast. It's almost 9 in the evening, so we should say goodbye now. We should. Our hour's up.
Alright.
I've been Alex.
I've been George. I mean, I'm George after this as well. I don't know why we say that.
Yeah.
I'm constantly George. That's my name.
Good point. Not me.
Yeah, there you go.
Stop saying on the radio.
I know.
The letdowns, or the cold leads as I like to call them. These are the stations that I contacted in an attempt to gain work experience. Juice Brighton was the first one that let me down. I actually became a member of the street team in the process of applying for work experience, which was something that was a bit off topic, but I probably will do some street team work with them, some promotion or whatever, but it's quite good to put down on the CV anyway. BBC Radio 1, Matt Fincham I have been able to get work experience with him previously. He was unable to pull strings. It worked out that the time I was asking for work experience was in fact the time that the annual national work experience scheme for BBC Radio 1 kicked in, and I thought I was going to get it. I thought I was going to get 2 weeks there, and last minute he pulled out and said, oh, there's nothing I can do, mate, I'm really sorry. The other one was Melanie Cager. I actually met Melanie Cager. For people who don't know, she is the producer for the Phil Taggart show on Radio 1. I met her, I know her quite well anyway. We had a few meetings, we had some emails, I actually had a coffee with her. But she failed at the last hurdle. She said it was outside of her power, almost. And it was around the same time, in fact, as the Matt Fincham work experience, which was a shame. But they're two connections that I'll carry on having. I mean, they don't go away now. I have their emails, I have both their phone numbers now, so they're only ever a text or a phone call away. Heart Sussex was actually something that my mum set up. She had an interview on Heart Sussex and was able to get me in there for a day. And I went round, did a whole promotional walk round of the studio, really enjoyed it, and then tried to set up some work experience, and the head of Heart actually turned around and just said, sorry, we don't have time for you at this time, and then tried to make a suitable time. It just didn't work out. Talk Live Sport. This was interesting. I got, my uncle actually knows the owner of Talk Live Sport, but they were unresponsive to any of my emails and calls, and my uncle was the one who attempted to get me in contact with him, and they just never emailed or called me back, and I sent 4 emails. Uckfield Community Station is actually closed for refurbishment. I have worked at Uckfield Community Station before when I was 16, 17, and they're closed for refurbishment for the next 6 months, and the studio is around the size of our number 3 Aspire studio. So for there to be a 6-month renovation, I don't know what's happening, but... Limitations. When we're talking about professional environment, it's very important to talk about the limitations to work experience. So, distance relative, this actually links into sustainable development. Because obviously, we can only travel a certain distance. Let's not be stupid here. I'm not going to travel to Glasgow for a week's worth of work experience. And it also links to sustainable development. I'm not going to travel, I'm not going to put that carbon emissions in my car. And so, obviously, it closes down the opportunity pool relatively. Working, university and job around experience time, I know that's a bit of a shoddy excuse, but sometimes you need to think about it, especially when we're trying to do a university work at the same time. There's only so many emails you can send. I know there is a whole aspect to work experience where pushing and constantly trying to contact someone is important, but we're all humans at the end of the day, and no one wants 25 emails and 25 missed calls on their phone from a young, budding producer who's better than the rest. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way. I think it's imperative to say that I could have always done better, because failure leads to success. And it's important to state that we must always look to go forward and better ourselves, because that's the only way we're ever going to move forward. And professional development. So, where do I go from here? The experience that I've had have definitely played a part in the future of my career. Whether that be the confidence I've gained, the technical skills, or the industry knowledge. I've understood the importance of a demographic-specific content, especially with Hot Radio and Nerve Radio. Being understanding what sounds good and what people want to hear and what's relevant to them is imperative to get a good listener base. Importance of time management. Something that I found with Paul was that he was constantly clocking up the time on the clock. It was constantly in the back of his mind that he was going to be on time, because at Hot Radio they have their news broadcasted from outside. It's Sky, and it's brought in right on bang on the dot. So you cannot be late, you cannot be early. It's all about swift transaction of links. And I really noticed that with Paul. He was constantly worrying about adding up content, how many minutes he was behind, how many minutes he was ahead, and what he needed to do to make it better and on time. Fluidity to my presenting and overall professionalism to links and content. I think that's come with the experience of Nerve and Aspire, but also watching Paul at Hot. But yeah, it's important to establish that my presenting has got better. I feel more confident on the radio. It becomes a second nature, to be honest with you now. But yeah, it is important to talk about that. A better understanding of the economic climate. I have a greater understanding of how the radio business works, especially working at a community station. I understand that there's a lot of volunteer work going on, and money is tight, to be honest with you, especially in the economic climate that we have at the moment. So where does this leave me? Well, obviously I'm going to apply for volunteer work at Hot. I've also got Nerve next year, which I hope to have a bigger input with. But these skills will indefinitely, whether it's the do's, the don'ts, or the maybes of radio, they will have an effect on my future career, whether it's freelance, whether it's presenting, whether it's producing, whether it's journalism. These things can be translatable into any sector of the media industry. Experience will definitely play a part in the future of my career. Apply to volunteer work, these things I've actually already said. Invaluable links with the BBC still. Outside interest in the Nerve show. We had an interesting email from a man who runs an outside production company, and he's interested in the idea of our show. We called ourselves The Dry Guys, Alex and myself, and there's a podcast in the works that we're currently looking to produce, which will be the same sort of format as our Nerve show, but a bit more in depth and a bit longer. And that is my work experience. Any questions?
Well done.